So, how does each attachment style deal with anger?
Ooh, so John Bowlby, father of attachment theory, he talks about two types of anger. Anger of hope, which means I use my anger as a signal that I need to heal something in this relationship. So his example is this child that, she was sick when she was really young and her mother left her alone at the hospital because of the hospital restrictions. And they're watching a video of her being alone at the hospital and she's angry. So she turns to her mom and says, "Mommy, where was you? Where was you?" It's vulnerable. It's a vulnerable anger. It's I'm angry, so I'm going to be vulnerable and admit that I'm hurt. Whereas anger of despair, Bowlby argues, is what insecurely attached people express. And it's this, he describes this child, Reggie, and Reggie had different caretakers growing up. And one of them was a nurse. She left to get married. She comes back. Reggie is like, my very own Marianne, but I hate her. So Reggie's angry, and his anger manifests as, let me destroy you, let me get revenge on you so that I don't have to deal with this strong emotion. I have to coddle this strong emotion by destroying this relationship and getting revenge. And
Hmm.
it's fundamentally because the insecurely attached person is not aware that it's possible to express yourself vulnerably and get your needs met. Really, they think, either I'm not talking about this at all, or I'm going to have to attack you and put you down because there's no middle ground of me sharing vulnerably that I'm hurt and you listening to me. That's impossible in the eyes of the insecurely attached person. So, what we see, in anxiously attached adults is they don't they don't express their needs, they don't express their needs, they don't express their needs. They get completely overwhelmed because they haven't created that space for them to feel safe until they blow up and they kind of make these demands and they'll put you down and they'll call you incompetent. They might try to psychoanalyze you, tell you about yourself and all of your problems, right? It is just, they're going to a character assassinate you a little bit, is the anxiously attached person. The avoidantly attached person, when they're angry. And well, here's the other thing you might see with the anxiously attached person, right? If you bring up a problem with the anxiously attached person, they're going to go into super self blame. Like, I'm horrible. I'm awful. I've done everything wrong. And in some ways, they make it all about them in that sort of response, right? Like, it's like, hey, you hurt me. And now I'm stuck trying to reassure you because all of a sudden you feel like I'm like attacking the very core of your being by telling you there's an issue in this relationship, right? So you'll see those sort of poles with the anxiously attached person, but the avoidantly attached person, they're angry. Honestly, they're probably not telling you, and then they leave and they just withdraw. And you're like, what the heck happened? I have no idea. I thought everything was fine. But again, the avoidantly attached person feels like if I express a need, you will reject me and maybe even shame me. So they do not express the need. They do not express the need. They do not express the need. And then they kind of withdraw or pull away. And when you try to approach them with the need, they might tell you you're too sensitive or you want too much or you're too fragile or you need to learn to be more independent, right? Like this very natural and normal giving and exchanging of needs that happens in any intimate relationship. In their eyes, to need is to be weak, right?
Hmm.
So they apply that to themselves and they apply that to anyone else around them. So they just kind of get angry by pulling away, but then if you get them to engage, they'll also kind of blame it all on you. So sometimes you'll see the avoidant person being like, it's your fault. I'm not attracted to you, or you need too much, or you're being too sensitive, right? Avoidantly attached people, again, have a lot of trouble apologizing and admitting fault because of that core fear of being a failure and being deficient. And so when you try to address anything, that core fear gets sort of rubbed that I'm a failure to you. So they need a lot of softness, honestly. Like avoidantly attached people, if you need to address something with them, making sure you're acknowledging everything they did well. You know, I love that you did this. I love that you cooked for me. I loved and appreciated that you responded to my text message this morning. And I would just add that if this additional thing could happen, it's going to make me really happy. Like they can't, if you try to bring them too much emotion, they're getting very overwhelmed. So if you
Mm.
want to try to approach the avoidantly attached person about an issue, trying to remain calm, trying to remain grounded, admitting all the things that they're doing right, and then just saying, and I would like to add, what would make our relationship even better is if you did this additional thing for me. And that's important. I think sometimes the anxiously attached person is like, the avoidantly attached person is not meeting my needs. And so, they're not a good person to be in a relationship with. And they don't notice that actually the avoidantly attached person has made improvements. They're not necessarily at where you want them to be. But if you want them to keep growing, you have to make sure you're recognizing those improvements. Because if you leave them in that place where they feel like they're a failure, they're going to be paralyzed. They're going to feel like no matter what I do, I can't meet this person's expectations. And then they're just going to sort of withdraw.
One of the things that I love about learning about attachment styles is it feels like it's another lens or framework through which you can view your relationships and not make them so personal. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like we tend to look at the way that other people behave as a direct reflection of us. And as I listen and try to absorb everything that you're saying, Dr. Franco, I'm learning more and more that a lot of times the way somebody reacts, particularly in stressful situations or situations where they feel triggered, has nothing to do with you and everything to do with their own internal wiring.
Exactly. Because what's happening in our body is more compelling to us than what's happening in the world, which means that if you're telling me, even very kindly and politely, that like, hey, you hurt me, and my body's suddenly on fire and I'm feeling like I'm a failure and I'm feeling so overwhelmed, right? Like, it doesn't matter that you would approach me very kindly and sensitively. What I'm going to respond to is the fire that's happening in my body, right? Like that. And
Mm.
that's even what I'm going to remember about the experience more so than, how you approach me and the realities of the external circumstance. And that's why attachment style is so tricky, right? Because there's all these signs for all of us that people are loving us on any given day. People are smiling at you. People are holding the door for you. Cars are stopping when you want to cross the street. People are texting you to check in. People are liking your Instagram page, right? But, if your attachment style says people don't love you, you're not going to read and take in any of that, right? It's like, it's how we're impacted by our relationships is less about, well, I can't say less about, but it's not just about what's actually happening. And it's so much about how we're interpreting what's happening. And that interpretation process is our attachment style. It's our interpretation of what's happening, what's happening in the objective world refracted through our lens of our attachment style. And so that is why it can get so tricky to get out of your attachment style, because you see in the world all the things that match your reality, right? Like the avoidantly attached people thinks people are untrustworthy, and you're trying to show up for them so much and be reliable. One time something else happens and you're not able to be reliable to them, right? And all of a sudden they're like, "Oh, it's true. You can't trust people. They're all going to betray you," right? And it's like that person's just being human. You have to let people be human. So that's why like there's just this huge confirmation bias when it comes to attachment style that can make it very hard to get out of, and why it's so helpful for me personally, and I think for everybody, to learn about and understand our attachment style, to understand our lens, to understand that it is a lens and it's not just the objective reality of the situation, because through that understanding we can change.
I am curious, do attachment styles attract opposites or the same types? I mean, how does that work? Because I often hear people going, I just keep dating the same loser over and over. Or you know what I'm saying? Like, why do I
Yeah.
always get people that are emotionally unavailable?
Yeah, so let's think about it, right? You're dating someone and they're hot and cold, and all of a sudden they pull away and they don't answer your text when they say that they will. And if you're secure, right, you're like, bye. Like, I feel happy about myself. If you're not going to treat me in a way that reflects that, I'm going to find someone else who does, right? Like, they're not willing to endure pain for the sake of being in a relationship. So, who is going to end up with a more avoidantly attached person is the person that's like, I am enthralled by your inconsistency and I have to get you to like me now. And that's my purpose and my journey. And in some ways, the highs and the lows really excite me, right? Like the anxiously attached person is going to be more likely to put up with some of the intimacy quirks of the avoidantly attached person, right? Because again, the anxiously attached person is kind of willing to sacrifice their own sense of self to be in a relationship. The securely attached person is not. So anxiously avoidantly attached people often need anxiously attached people as the glue that will kind of keep them in relationship
Hmm.
to each other. So that's why we see a lot of anxiously and avoidantly attached pairings. And you hear a lot of anxiously attached people that are like, I need to earn their love. If they give it freely, I'm not attracted to that. Or if someone's totally secure and available, they're like, just not feeling it, right? Because they confuse them being triggered with them being in love. They
Oh,
confuse,
can we
yeah,
talk about that?
yeah,
Confusing being triggered with being in love. Dr.
yep,
Franco, let's
yeah,
unpack this.
yeah. So if you're anxiously attached and you're triggered, someone's triggering your wounds of abandonment and you're feeling high arousal because of that. You're feeling very strong emotions because you're feeling triggered and wounded. It's like hurt. Hurt is like a high arousal emotion, and so is excitement, and so is thrill, right? And so it can be easy to feel like, I like this person because they're making me feel high arousal, which is high arousal is present in pain, high arousal is present in excitement. And so you're being pulled in. It's funny, when I was like more anxiously attached to people, it'd be like I would want to be with this person until they'd want to be with me. And then I'd feel like, oh, and now I'm less excited for some reason, right? And that's a sign that, oh, I was being pulled in by this wound of abandonment that they were triggering that made me want to find my sense of self again through getting them to like me. It was like I was trying to get my sense of self through being in the relationship with this avoidant person. But in finding more security, it's more like I don't like feeling triggered. I don't like feeling like someone's going to abandon me and they're not going to show up for me. I no longer feel like that's sexy or enthralling because I have a more positive sense of myself. And I look for relationships that reflect my own positive sense of myself. And secure person is like on their own side and they're wanting to take care of themselves and make
Hmm.
themselves feel safe, right? And so they're attracted to places that make them feel grounded and make them feel safe in that way.
Let's put the shoe on the other foot and talk about that same trigger versus love from an avoidant attachment person. What would they be feeling in terms of how they collapse, a situation that's triggering with love?
So here's the confusing thing about attachment. When you're falling in love, it can sometimes replace your attachment style a bit. So it may take you a year to kind of figure out what someone's attachment is. Like everything can be going great and you're connecting and there's a lot of intimacy building. And then a year in, once you start living together, you're just like, who is this person? Like all of a sudden they're so closed off. All of a sudden they're so demanding of me. Like what the heck happened? It's because like all of the like chemicals that are released, this cocktail of chemicals when you're falling in love can be so powerful that they might replace some of your underlying wounds and triggers and make you feel pulled
Mm.
into this relationship even when you're afraid of intimacy. So you can carry both of those things at the same time. So sometimes you'll see like people feeling secure with each other for a year when there's all of this cocktail of emotions, avoidantly attached people feeling comfortable with connection and intimacy, right? And then after a year, after some time, all of a sudden those avoidant feelings come up and all of a sudden they're like, I want to get out of this. All of a sudden they're like, I need to pull away. All of a sudden they're like, I feel really suffocated. All of a sudden they're like, my partner expects too much out of me. And so that is the really confusing thing. That's why it's so like hard. I don't know, really pat on the back to all of us who are just able to sustain healthy relationships because it's so hard. Um, but I think that's, what we can kind of tend to see. And I think the avoidant person, their template for intimacy is that people aren't going to respect their boundaries, is that they can't necessarily trust people. So when the anxiously attached person is like pushing too much or not respecting their boundaries and demanding a lot from them, again, that's part of their template for intimacy. It's not that someone's going to be loving and, hear them out and take their perspective into consideration. So So in that way, the insecure attachment, it kind of fine tunes our expectations in relationships, so that insecurely attached people, because their expectations of others are that other people will relate to them in an insecurely attached way, they're more willing to accept when someone does so in their life. Whereas the securely attached person, because their expectations of others is that you're going to treat me nicely, you're going to be loving towards me, you're going to be accepting of me, you're going to be kind toward me. When people aren't that way, they're like, this isn't good for me and this isn't a good fit for me.
It's interesting because as you're talking, I'm also thinking, boy, you see this play out in friendships too all the time, which is, of course, what your book is about, that, people collect best friends, and then all of a sudden, within a year, now they're collecting a new best friend and the other ones sort of faded away. So let's end by talking about secure attachment. You are going to finally get some answers to questions that I am sure have been on your mind for a long time.